So back in 2020, I, Steven Schinder, started a podcast called Delayed Replay, recapping and reviewing the latest films. However, it got broadcast into an alternate universe where those films got delayed and came out differently from how I was describing them. Because of how me and my guests had been describing the films, people in that other universe were saying that this was all an improvised comedy podcast, which, listening back, I can totally get why they believe that. A lot of weird stuff happened in that first year, and I even met my other self from that other universe, who pops in from time to time, for better or worse. And now, in the year 2023, this podcast continues, still recapping and reviewing movies and sometimes some other things that got delayed or cancelled in that other universe. A new episode Saturdays every other week, unless I decide otherwise for some special reason or whatever. You are listening to Delayed Replay, Season 4.
Hey everyone, before getting into the episode about Venom 3, just want to mention that after the discussion, there will be a review of Saw X from the universe where it just came out a couple weeks prior to this. So, yeah, no spoilers yet, but it'll be in the end after the discussion, like I mentioned. And this is feeling kind of redundant, but yeah, this will be the spoiler review of that, and you'll get a warning and whatnot. But yeah, check the timestamp in the show notes if you want to check that out first. Otherwise, without further delay, enjoy the episode. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we like to recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, as always, Steven Schinder, and for this episode, I figured it'd be kind of fun to bring the other me from that other universe since, in Venom there is we're talking about Venom 3, which is called Venom, Knull and Void. Because of that symbiotic relationship, I thought it'd be kind of fun to have the other me on, and he'll be speaking with a Venom sounding voice, so it's not confusing. So here's Steven from that other universe where the movies got delayed. Or Steve Venom.
Hello, how is this voice?
I guess it's fine. Like, I'm able to understand it, at least.
Oh, good, 'cause what I really hated about the Venom sequel in my universe, Venom Let There Be Carnage, is much of the time I could not understand what Venom was saying and needed some damn subtitles.
Oh, yeah, I quite liked the version that came out in this delayed replay universe. It was pretty good, but from the sounds of it, you didn't like the one in your universe?
It was garbage. It felt rushed, like it was missing a middle act, and there was just no character depth in it. It just feels like Sony doesn't know what they're doing.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not so sure about your voice choice, but whatever. We'll just roll with it. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where we land on this third one, or this version of the third one. There is a third one on the way in your universe, right?
I think so, last I heard. Maybe. I don't really care about the Venom movies in my universe anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, we're recording this on Friday the 13th, so the day before it's supposed to come out, so that tells you a lot.
Yes, it's very chaotic.
So the previous film, at least in my universe, really set up a lot of things. There were a bunch of symbiotes, and like it came out like 3 years ago at this point, so that's a lot of time for one to wait for there to be an actual payoff. And they've kept teasing this all-powerful villain called Knull, who in this film we get to see more of. It seemed prior that he's just some other big symbiote, but we also see like this armor that he wears, and he has something that looks kind of like the Necro Sword. I'm not sure if he got it from Gore or there's a lot that they don't really explain in this movie, and it feels very rushed, which is weird when they've been saying this up for 3 months, or I guess I should say that in air quotes, like setting up, like just having post credit teases.
Yes, it is not enough to just do that. The movie definitely felt rushed. Like, it was about an hour and 45 minutes. It felt like they were trying to compromise, but it just felt too much too fast.
Yeah, and like we said, the title is Venom, Knull, and Void, which, I mean, they also add this other villain in this one called the Void, who's like an evil version of Sentry, another like kind of Superman-like character in Marvel Comics. But yeah, I don't know if y'all can hear a dog outside, but I might leave that in. But yeah, so this is what am I trying to say? Like, it felt like they were just trying to add another villain just so that they could use this title and be clever and punny, but it just doesn't really work.
Yes, and I, for one, am tired of evil Superman-like characters. It's so overplayed at this point, and it really felt shoehorned into this film.
Yeah, so the movie actually starts off at this bar, right? So Eddie Brock is just drinking a bit, and he's having an internal conversation with the symbiote, with Venom, because, he's gonna be a father, as was teased at the end of the previous one. Anne was pregnant, and there's also, some symbiote related stuff that also ties into that, which is kind of gross to think about.
Oh yes, I don't even want to think about it. But it's also weird that when they do have this baby, whose name is Dylan, it pretty much goes through, like, after he's born, he goes through growth acceleration, so he becomes an adult man really quickly, and, Dylan Brock doesn't sound too different from D. Bradley Baker.
Oh yeah, the guy who voices the clones in the Clone Wars, who also went through growth acceleration. Yeah, that's a good comparison there. So yeah, they're kind of like Eddie and Anne are really going through it psychologically, like having to live through their child growing up this fast, and they're wondering like how long is its lifespan.
Yes, but apparently there's like some foretold prophecy or something. It's really confusing, not well explained. So, again, kind of like Star Wars. But Dylan Brock was created so that he could fight Knull. Like, he's believed to be the one who could take him down.
Yeah, and, Eddie and Anne try to put a lid on it because they're really scared for their son. He's not a kid anymore, at least physically speaking, but he's an adult and has like his own symbiote suit and powers. There's like actually a father-son bonding moment when they eventually Eddie relents and trains his son how to fight crime and whatnot. And you can tell that Dylan is really trying to get the approval of his father, and it is kind of sweet, this back and forth that they have. But of course Venom, Eddie's symbiote, gets kind of jealous of this bonding.
Yes, but that doesn't last too long, as that symbiote starts seeing the symbiote on Dylan as a son, and they have a bonding moment.
Yeah, it's like all this stuff that you would think they would take more time with gets like accelerated real fast. Like the growth acceleration is a real apt thing to happen in this type of movie. It kind of spells out like what exactly is happening.
Yes, and Eddie is also struggling as a reporter. There are other reporters who are getting better scoops than him.
Yeah, especially the report about a really great ice cream shop where, like, it's apparently it's the best ice cream ever.
Yes, but they don't mention the brand name. I think that's because, they don't want to shut the door on any sponsors. They kind of want to have their cake and eat it too, and just leave it to the imagination.
Yeah, which in itself is kind of refreshing because we've talked about how a bunch of movies, at least here in the delayed replay universe, have a lot of like cross marketing, brand advertising, and it gets really distracting and annoying. So it's kind of surprising that they show restraint here.
Yes, although apparently there is a vegetation flavored ice cream.
Oh yeah, I don't know what to think of that. Like it was green. I could kind of taste in my mouth how it is, and it feels, I don't know, kind of middle of the road when I imagine it.
I think it could be delicious.
Oh well, guess we'll never know since it's not real.
Damn it.
So Eddie, he's trying to get himself some exposure, trying to find some other thing to report on. And with everything going on in this movie, I don't know why they included this subplot where he's trying to still be a great reporter, and he's just like looking for something around town, kind of wandering aimlessly. But he also has like the family stuff, and he has Anne, and he has Dylan, and there's a stuff in space. Dylan, I don't know if we mentioned this, like telepathically feels the calling of Knull, and there are other characters, and like we've mentioned before, who are somewhat aware. Like he gets an email from what I guess we're supposed to like assume is like Madam Web and her crew, that like Knull is coming. I don't know if there's a scheduling issue or what, or maybe they just showed restraint in how many characters they want to feature here.
Yes, also, maybe they thought that not enough people would have seen the Madam Web movie to know who they are.
Yeah, and it's kind of annoying that they. Yeah, I don't know. Like, you would think they would take a big swing, try to feature those characters more, but this is also a different era, so maybe they didn't want to go through like aging them up. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, although lots of people do get tired of like so many connections, so that's another thing there.
Yeah, although there is a moment where Venom, Eddie's symbiote and Dylan's symbiotes are like both telepathically looking across the multiverse and thinking about their morals, and that makes them see Miles Morales in the Spider-Verse universe.
Yes, I guess that in itself is an example of cross marketing, and as much as we love Miles, it was very distracting and kind of didn't really add anything to this movie.
Right, I totally agree. It's kind of just decorative lore stuff for this.
Decorative vegetable.
Yeah, check out decorativevegetable.com where my friend Dylan and other friend Keon have their podcasts about Doctor Who, Blake 7, movie trilogies, and classic sci-fi shows, so yeah, check that out. Some complete projects and whatnot.
So there's also this gross moment where the symbiotes have like a spitting contest, like spitting parts of themselves and then putting them back on themselves.
Yeah, but it's not as gross as it would be if it was real spit,
Yeah, good point.
So, Anne is really worried about Dylan, and like if he's going through this growth acceleration, maybe he could deteriorate. Like that's her main concern. But her son tries to assure her that, look, I don't know how much time I have, but I have to go up into space in order to face Knull with whatever time I have left. And this is kind of, they try to force an emotional family moment where it's like stuff's about to go down and they're it's really weird because it goes from like a grounded setting with hints of like the space stuff and then very quickly goes into space. Like it's after the Void himself attacks the city that Eddie finally has a scoop. He kind of looks opportunistic when he does this, so it's not really doing favors for his character, but he finally does get the scoop and make a report about the Void. And but with the Void and Knull, who apparently end up working together, like we never really get a full scene explaining why for this alliance.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to just assume they're both powerful beings, and they figure that since they're both powerful, they would stand a better chance.
Yeah, it's very irregular, the approach of this film.
Yes, but, they go to the space shuttle place. Like, I don't know, would this be NASA, or would this be like their, I don't know. They didn't show the logo, but I don't really remember if they have like their own fictional version of NASA, like how Invader Zim as NASA place. So I think they kind of keep it ambiguous. Yes, but they go into the rocket ship and go into space, after Dylan has learned all his lessons about how to be a protector.
Yeah, but also we should mention that these other symbiote characters, that some familiar, some not so familiar, get called to Knull and sort of are pulled up into space. Like they just sort of fly upward, and it's like, well, I guess Knull's powers are allowing them to be able to survive through space at this speed, and they get absorbed into his armor, and he just looks super OP. And like some of them are in his armor, and the rest are like an army of symbiotes. So he and the Void are like commanding them on this like unnamed planet that's got like a lot of canyons and stuff.
Yes, although you can tell in places like where the green screen is at.
Yeah, it's not very convincing. I should also mention that Knull is played by Andy Serkis, who also directed this third installment. So he's basically trying to put his stamp as much as he can. And Andy Serkis has a great voice. Like he's great as Knull, but yeah, like I can't think of any other candidate who would have done a better job at the moment.
Yes, but when they eventually get to Knull and Void, the fight is not really that satisfying. Because, it's Dylan and Eddie against a whole army and these two super OP villains.
Yeah, and it's really surprising that they don't, like, honestly, it's surprising that they don't die right away. Because you would think that they would with how powerful these guys are, but the way that they explain it in universe is that, oh, they're just toying with them, and they're trying to make Eddie and Dylan part of their army, and they're trying to resist as much as they can, being like, this is not working, don't let it work on us. And but Eddie's symbiote, Venom, gets separated from him and ends up becoming part of this army of symbiotes. And you even have Toxin, who is known for being like an anti-hero, but has also kind of randomly thrown into this movie, but trying to resist as well, but unfortunately becomes part of this army.
Yeah, I really did not like the way that played out.
Um, yeah, and so this little engagement here, um, yeah, it gets like really gruesome because Eddie gets sliced open to the point where like he gets torn like in the middle of the torso and you can see a bit of his liver even though it's not like pulled out like at least at the moment.
Oh yeah, this got very gory. It felt like they were trying to play to the, the horror October Halloween vibes.
Yeah, I totally agree it's like that. But eventually, Venom, the symbiote, gosh, I hate like going back and forth between these, but um he sees Eddie getting hurt and then he's able to resist Knull's control and I guess the power of friendship is what brings him and Eddie back together and then Eddie kind of regains some strength and he and Dylan are able to like fight off some of this horde right here. Um like at the moment when Eddie was feeling so depressed and ready to embrace death.
Yeah, it was a very forced moment though. Like we've seen this before in instances where perhaps worked better, but here it just did not, in my opinion.
No, yeah, I can agree with that. And then Knull is basically like taunting them, like, "So this is your quest? Or let me try Andy Serkis's voice.
So this is your quest? You really think you could defeat me?" Yeah, it's a really cliche villain line though, but I do like Andy Serkis's voice for what it's worth.
Yeah, and you could say he's the grandfather of CGI motion capture characters, so understandable that he'd get involved with all this. But it kind of feels like the people involved in this movie had no clue how to construct it. Like, it felt like they were trying to follow the Infinity War model and make Knull and now Void like these big, like, overarching or like big bad villains, but the buildup just wasn't as satisfying, and neither was this final confrontation.
Yeah, I totally agree. It feels like just something cobbled in some garage. Um, like not even a factory assembly line, just a garage with very few tools and not enough people and thought and care.
No, yeah, I totally get what you mean. You could definitely feel the executive meddling in this. Like, I don't know. Like, there are certain movies, like Deadpool 3, for example, where it's like, yeah, my faith is restored in these types of movies. But then you see this and it's like, oh gosh, I'm tired. I'm tired of it all.
Yeah, the different ways of handling comic book movies.
Yeah, it feels like they're just trying to do the bare minimum and trying to adhere to some manual of how to do these types of movies. And even then, it feels like they're not following them very well.
Yeah, but there is this moment where Dylan is able to take out a good chunk of this army, and Eddie compliments him, and Dylan's like, "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree," which I don't. At this point, it feels like they're just trying to pad out the runtime.
Yeah, it totally does. It barely stirs a thing in me. But they get to a point where they're surrounded and they have no shelter. Knull and Void are still all powerful. But then, like, before we know it, the movie is pretty much like almost over. Like, um, this is so dumb. Like, they spend like the last 20 or maybe it's 30 minutes, like, they all get teleported to some other world and a lot of it is like, they're Knull and Void are put on a different part of this world, and Eddie and Dylan are put on another, and there are also some other symbiote characters. Like they're all put in different places on this world. So this battle between all of them is no longer happening because now they're all in different locations, and we spend quite a bit of time with them trying to get around and figure out where they are.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the end of the Dune Part 1 movie in my universe, where it kind of like waffles around and they wander and it sort of just ends.
Yeah, it kind of just ends when we realize what the big picture is, which is not at all surprising. We all knew that this was what was coming, but we find out that this world is Battle World. The world where everyone's supposed to, I guess, fight each other in the Secret War movie. Or Secret Wars, Secret Wars. I don't remember if it's singular or plural. But yeah, like we get glimpses of like other characters who've been hinted at going here before. But yeah, and it's I don't know. Like I know Secret War is coming, but I really wish these movies didn't feel like they needed to just adhere to building up to this. Like I wish that they could just be their own movie and then tease it as like a post. Well, maybe not even as a post credit thing because I'm like really tired of that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like it feels like they had a couple of ideas, but then we're told, oh, Battle World, Secret Worlds, we gotta tie into that. And then it just, these Venom movies are trying to build up to their own Infinity War, but it turns out, oh, there's actually this different Infinity War type event that's going to happen. Focus more on that.
Yeah, and like Knull and Void feel like they're powered down in this world, so they're not even a threat anymore for a good chunk at the end of this movie. And it feels really half-assed, like this scenario. I mean, like even Thanos being beheaded, like I never had a problem with that and what put out after that, but this just feels like uninspired without a doubt.
Yeah, I just couldn't resist groaning when we got to the end of this movie.
Right. So I guess we could talk about the like mid credit and post credit stuff. So you want to go into that?
Yeah, so in the mid credit scene, um, basically, it's basically feels like a trailer for Secret War, even though it's still a long ways away. There's a montage of the people who are there, but this just did not do much for me.
Yeah, me neither. And then the post-credit scene is just a trailer for the Spider-Man 2 video game, which itself features Venom. So, it kind of makes sense to include that, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, it feels kind of random. Maybe, I don't know, what's more random, this or the Gotham Knights thing, or the, when Amazing Spider-Man 2 had that post-credit scene of X-Men Days of Future Past. So I was like part of a deal.
I think that one kind of takes the cake, but these other video game related ones feel really uninspired.
Right. Yeah, so I guess that's... I don't know, was there anything about the music that you liked?
It felt kind of generic, like you can't really hum any of it.
Yeah, I agree. And as for the cinematography, like there were a bunch of instances where again, it's lit dark so that the CGI stuff doesn't look as bad, but knowing that that was the reason, like just without looking anything up, it felt really distracting to me. And yeah, like I just,
Yeah, I get it. I'm like tired of the overall look of these movies, like this technique.
right. But hey, I feel like we were able to have a healthy discussion about this. So,
And I guess they are trying to make things come full circle since, from what I understand in the comics, Venom is introduced like at the end of or right after Secret War. But other than that, it feels like this was put together um like as if someone watched YouTube videos about certain comic book characters and tried watching them at double the speed and then just quit halfway through each of them.
yeah, I totally get that feel. It very much feels like that. Um, yeah, there's just not a lot of care in this movie. I guess we could go into final thoughts and score out of 10. So, what are your final thoughts and score out of 10 for Venom, Knull, and Void?
Well, I have a feeling that, you know, maybe it's because Let There Be Carnage was so bad in my universe. And I mean, it feels like they weren't sure where to go with that character in the movies here. Like, certain things in this movie got forgotten about or not touched on enough in favor of the whole the universe is about to be destroyed thing. But, with that in mind, I would say this is better than the Let There Be Carnage in my universe, but that's not saying much. So, I'm thinking this one is a 5.5 out of 10 bars that Eddie Brock might drink at.
Okay, nice. I think I'm gonna go lower because, like, maybe it's because the previous movie, at least in my universe, Let There Be Carnage from 3 years ago, my perspective, it was pretty good. So having this follow that feels like much of a letdown, to me anyway. And the 3 year wait, it became clear that they weren't sure where to go. But I'm thinking for this one, I'm gonna give it 4 out of 10 Spider-Man video game promos. So yeah, it feels like, it felt for a bit that Sony might have an idea of what to do with certain things here, but I just don't know anymore.
Oh, yeah, in my universe, it's clear that they don't, unless it's the Spider-Verse movies.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, I guess that'll do it. Thanks for joining me again, Steven, from that other universe. And yeah, it was like a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad I can stop doing this voice now.
Right. So, I'll let you rest your voice and then you can record your review of Saw X from your universe. But for now, just want to tell people to keep an eye out for another sort of horror, I guess Halloween themed episode in a couple weeks. But for now, I'll just list my plugs real quick. Follow me at Steven Schinder, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Facebook at Steven Schinder Storytelling, StevenSchinder.com, and my standalones at Stepping Stones Books, which have horror in them, but also have comedy and fantasy and sci-fi, are available on Amazon. There's the first one, Lemons Will Make Rain, and the second one, Trespassing Through the Visages. Definitely check those out. I think for this time of year, maybe like this will be your jam for reading them. Um, I'm trying to think what else is going on. Um, oh yeah, check out Question Possible Answer. Friend Jesse's podcast. There's an episode coming out around the week of Halloween about the original Saw movie. So yeah, it wouldn't be Halloween without Saw, right? So um, and yeah, you'll recognize the guest there. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And also check out my podcast / vlog that I do with my dad, Yes Shift, where we talk about the band Yes, and have also talked to people involved with Yes. Like I said, we've interviewed Trevor Rabin recently, and we actually reviewed his solo album that's just come out, Rio. We've also interviewed Kevin Mulrine from Yes Music podcast, who wrote a book about the album Tormato. It's called The Tormato Story. And yeah, I've done a couple a few other lives on there where it's like just me on my own in between certain things. And keep an eye out for something that might also be out the weekend that this episode comes out, as I am planning on going to a certain concert tonight, which should be a lot of fun. And you can also email Delayed Replay via delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on symbiotes, or broccoli. Like, I don't know. But yeah, I think that'll do it for now. And after the sign off, you'll get the recording from my other self whenever he's ready, and he can record that and submit it. But without further delay, have a good day. Alright, so Saw X. Now, before I get into it, just a little Friday the 13th trivia. And it's not about my mask, which I've probably mentioned before. Got signed by Derek Mears, seen him perform with the Resistance. I'm sure I've already mentioned that before. So in the original Saw movie, the detectives deduce that the message for Amanda Young was recorded on Tuesday the 17th, which would imply that her test took place in a month that had a Friday the 13th. Now, that got me wondering whether Mark's test in that movie may have been on that day. But anyway, so onto Saw X. I'm going to get into the spoilers. I already did non-spoiler review at the end of the Madam Web episode. So I really appreciate the way that this one took its time before really getting into the traps. For at least a half hour, or what felt like a third of a movie, we're looking at things through John Kramer's point of view. It's very much his character study, and Tobin Bell does such a great job as always. This is the movie where he probably had the most to do. And there's even a moment where he sees someone about to commit theft, and it cuts to that person in a trap, and we realize after that scene that's just Jigsaw or John Kramer imagining the trap he wants to put this guy in before he repents. But it really shows how his mind works, how the moment he sees someone commit a crime or a moral sin, basically, he automatically thinks about what trap or test to possibly put the person in, which I found really fascinating. And again, this is between Saw 1 and Saw 2. The producers have said, or I read this somewhere, that they've said that it takes place 3 weeks after the original Saw movie. I would have placed it further out, because if it's only 3 weeks out, then John Kramer's hair grows back really, really fast. That's something they could potentially retcon in a later film if they want to, like change the time frame and it wouldn't really change anything. John Kramer is told by someone in his support group, I think his name was Henry, about a doctor in Norway who could cure his cancer and how he went through that, basically, some treatment. And this ties into the thing in the flashback in Saw 6. So that places that flashback shortly after Saw 1, when I think before we used to think it took place before Saw 1 instead of shortly after. And yeah, so Jigsaw gets this treatment of, he gets in contact with that doctor's daughter, but things are not as they seem, as he ultimately, he's having a good time with these people, and they allegedly do the surgery, and after he's told that it's been removed, the brain tumor, he begins thinking about, like, we're not told this, but it's show don't tell, it's done really well. Instead of, he crumples up a paper from his notebook, a sketch of a trap, and starts instead drawing out like some architectural designs. Although I would say it's pretty risky for him to throw a paper with a trap in it in the garbage can. But then again, in the original Saw, he has the design of the reverse bear trap right in front of him when he's surrounded by people at the hospital. So, he's a catch me if you can kind of guy, basically. But of course, he ultimately finds out it's all a sham. There was no operation done on him. This is just a group of people who scam, I guess, rich people who are trying to get cured of various things, or cancer at least. And I honestly thought that there would be a twist that John Kramer typed the URL for this treatment like incorrectly, and because he typed it a different way, it led him to these illegitimate people instead of a legit doctor. But ultimately, no, that was not the twist. But yeah, like for me, like I would be super careful with a URL given the weirdness of the internet. So that was kind of on my mind for a huge chunk of the movie. But no, that was not the twist. But as he and Amanda Young, his apprentice, put these people in their tests, we see a bit of John and Amanda's back and forth. So it's kind of strange how the marketing for this movie, like the posts I would see in my social media, it was like, witness the return of Amanda Young. And it's like, of course Saw fans know who Amanda Young is, but is the general public aware of her? Like, the average Joe on the street who has not seen a Saw movie before, like, what's that going to mean to them, really? So it might have been, I don't know, I feel like Saw fans would have already been sold on Tobin Bell being back and him being the focus after being absent from Spiral, apart from just a photograph. But in any case, I feel like Shawnee Smith and Tobin Bell really got back into the roles really well. I mean, for Tobin Bell, it hadn't been that long. Jigsaw was 6 years before this. Like, pretty sure that's when it was filmed. But Shawnee Smith, like, had not recorded anything new for a Saw movie since 2009's Saw 6. And I didn't even care that they looked older. The other surprise, or I guess people speculated that this could happen, but the surprise cameo, John Kramer makes a phone call and he's like, detective, someone is in need of our services. And we don't hear what the name of the detective is, but it's clear if you're a Saw fan, that's Detective Hoffman. And later on, we do hear his voice when we get a flashback to the phone call. So I thought to myself, okay, that's going to be a cool way of bringing him in without going full throttle with the fan service. That's very tasteful. But then, jumping ahead, the mid-credit scene, we do see Hoffman. And again, Costas Mandylor, he looks older, but for these characters, I don't really care that they look older as long as the performance is great. It's the Better Call Saul thing, like where they clearly look older than they were on the previous thing, but you don't care because the performances are so good. So I thought he did a nice job in his little cameo as Hoffman. What I did not like, what I did like is that this mid-credit scene ties up a loose thread. The guy Henry from the support group, who, as it turns out, is a con artist who leads people to these fake doctor type people. That was a thread that I kept wondering about throughout the movie, so I was glad that that was tied up. It shows that John Kramer and Mark Hoffman found him and got him and put him in a test. What I did not like was that they had this set in the original Saw bathroom. Like, there's absolutely no reason that it needs to take place in that bathroom of this scene. The whole movie felt so grounded, and then this scene here feels more like cinematic universe than cinema, like the rest of the film felt. It really felt like executives might have forced them to do this scene. Like, hey, people love the Saw bathroom, so let's put Adam's corpse here, and maybe Zepp's corpse was there too. But when I saw this, I thought maybe Adam still had more hair, and that could be a visual cue that this is not too long after the first movie. I'd have to watch it once it's available to stream officially. Like, I could rent it and pause and see for sure. But like, it did not need to be in this room. It could have just been any abandoned warehouse and it would have been fine. But it does make me wonder if the next movie, if they make one, would focus more on Hoffman and his relationship with Kramer, whereas this one kind of focused on Amanda's relationship with him. And I do feel this does add something to their relationship. So another factor I really appreciated, it was that this movie shows that there are variables that John Kramer does not take into account and that legitimately surprise him. And that's something you could kind of guess throughout the other movies, but I feel like over time it came to seem like he just knows all and knows everything. I think Tobin Bell even said once that Jigsaw knows all. But this movie reinforces that sometimes there are things he does not foresee, but it just somehow ends up playing in his favor. And I'll say the ending doesn't really feel like a twist. The ending plays out pretty much how you expect, but it's still satisfying because it's what you want to happen with these antagonists that he and Amanda have tested. These really terrible people who aren't above putting a kid in the game. So I think we're past a point where the Saw movies will have a really surprising twist ending. I think Jigsaw was at the end of that. Like, that was a really great twist. And then Spiral didn't really have Spiral tried having a twist, but it was predictable. And not quite fully satisfying. Whereas this one, it doesn't really feel like a big twist, but it is satisfying. Although it is weird how when John and Amanda walk out with the kid, it's treated like, oh, they're going to have a happy ending type thing. But we know that John and Amanda are going to put more people in terrible situations. And I feel like the kid, maybe there's a language barrier and he's just unaware that John Kramer was the one who set all of this up. Because when he's brought in, from his point of view, it might look like the woman in charge of a doctor's daughter, who's not really a doctor, might have been in charge of all of this. So from that kid's perspective, things might be all fine and whatever. I will say it was unsettling seeing blood poured onto the kid. If it's poured onto John Kramer, then fine, but I was kind of hoping it would be explained that, oh, it was never real blood, it was just water that was dyed red. But Uh, yeah, it also makes you question like where that blood was from. But with these Saw movies, there are lots of unanswered questions. So overall, this was a great character study. It felt more like a drama than some of the other Saw movies. It had a nice balance between the more compelling stuff that has death and the like trap aspect, because I feel like some of the movies focused a lot more on the traps than character focused stuff. I feel like this one really struck the balance, and it's really wild. This is from the same pair of writers that worked on Jigsaw and Spiral, because all three of these revival attempts have different feels to them. But I have a feeling the next one will probably be set within this time frame between Saw 1 and Saw 2, which is a large time frame. Some people say it's a year. I think it could be like maybe a 9-month gap just based on certain things. But yeah, let's see. I had a thought. I know I had a thought. But that being said, I would still like for future installment to tie up the loose threads from Jigsaw and Spiral as well, even if they're each separate movies. Like, I feel like you could turn this into an anthology series. So you could have another title that has Saw in it, another that has Jigsaw in it. Maybe it's Jigsaw 2 and one is Spiral 2. Although I know that could be very confusing for the general public, but I'm sure they could find a way to make things tie together, because while I am curious about where they could go with this time gap between 1 and 2, I would still like them to resolve the things that are like further in the future, like post Jigsaw, post Spiral, like at the end of the chronological timeline as it is so far. So yeah, Saw X, 9 out of 10 imaginary traps that John thinks of while witnessing crimes. It's that great. It's my second favorite book behind the first one. So yeah, definitely highly recommend. Hopefully you have seen it by now. I don't know why you'd listen to this segment if you haven't. But yeah, I've really enjoyed watching the film. So yeah, that's it for now. And without further delay, have a good day.